Another day, another review. This time it's the KZ PR1, the balanced edition with more bass. And I know, white disc, white cable, looks a bit funny, but who cares? Let's start. So build wise, they're pretty good. They are really light, and I'm really a fan of this kind of industrial design where you can see like a lot of the I don't know if it's called grill with IEMs too, but just the ventilation holes or whatever this stuff is, and the see through, so you can see like the planar driver and anything inside. It's just really cool, really well made, and doesn't feel cheap at all. You also have the autofocus, the KZ logo, and I don't know if you can read it here, but it's planar IEM. So you can be sure you did not buy one of these old-fashioned dynamic drivers. Again, a sturdy plastic construction. I don't know if this is some type of metal plate here. It's just difficult to. Could be aluminium, like some light metal. Anyway, it feels really sturdy and not cheap. No issues here. Cable is actually, at least for me, it feels fine. It doesn't tangle up that much. You get your occasional pretzel here, but otherwise it's fine. Till now, I did not experience any issues with the cable. So all in all, build quality of the whole package feels pretty good. These do fit my ear quite well with most ear tips. They do look a bit bulky, and although the PR1 is not the smallest IEM, they do not feel intrusive or anything. The ear tips you get with the PR1 are also okay. I honestly cannot really judge here. They feel fine and they work for me. I think I changed them, but I still remember the ear tips from the PR1s being okay, just not especially good, but also not like bad or anything. They worked. I do remember them being a bit different though, because the material which the spring tips are made of feels like a mixture between the usual silicone and it's mixed with some type of cloth. Again, I used them in the beginning, but I just changed them to these normal silicone spring tips. But yeah, that's just like a really personal thing, and they were of okay quality. I do feel the nozzle going a bit deeper than other IMs. It's not as bad as with the Truthear Zero, which had this really bulky feeling in your ear. These are certainly not bad or anything. It's just like a little bit deeper than the other ones I have here with me. So comfort is fine, pretty okay, but these do not disappear in my ear or anything. But I can wear these for a long time without any issues, so that's a plus. Talking about sound, I will start with the power requirement of these, because actually these do need quite a bit of power. I'm mostly using my cheap Samsung dongle, and I could get them close to the volume being loud enough to enjoy music, but it does feel a little weak. And then changing to my FiO E10K on the desktop PC, that one drives them way better, and they appear just a bit more powerful that way than with the dongle. And I think the Samsung dongle is kind of similar to the Apple one. So maybe you can get one of these mobile decks if you do not already have one. Then that one should be plenty enough. Again, I have here the balanced version, which looks a bit different. It's more gray. I think the hi-fi version is more silver, and then there's the pro version, which something in between. And but this one actually has a pretty audible bass boost. I think it's around 4 dB maybe, or 5, more than the hi-fi version. And again, the pro version is something somewhere in between, but it has less bass than these. So these are kind of more bass heavy I am. Listening to these are, and looking at the frequency response, these are pretty much a straight V-shaped IEM with a good amount of bass and upper treble, but it's not overdone. Like the mid-range is not drowned out. It's just a little much with like certain songs that are already kind of V-shapey recorded. I've been reading up on KZ, and apparently this is kind of their house tuning. So they recently started getting into more different tunings, but up until recently, you really had to like bass and treble, which people often found piercing and harsh. And so I was really curious how the Pier 1 here works out for me. With the one I have here, I can only say that I really like the tuning the balance Pier 1 has. You have, again, a strong amount of bass that is pretty evenly distributed from sub bass to mid bass. So it can get somewhat boomy, but it's also like really powerful and it gives the rhythm section of a song a lot of drive. Since this is actually my first planar IEM, I was really curious if it does sound different from the dynamic drivers I heard. And well, does the bass sound different from the one of a dynamic driver? Well, maybe a bit. Actually, I do miss the usual texture you can find in planar headphones. I kind of heard a greater difference changing from dynamic over ears to planar ones. And don't get me wrong, I like the bass here. It's just not as textured as I would have expected from a planar. Like it does not sound especially clean, but it's still really capable and I enjoy it a lot. Mid-range is recessed as expected from a V-shaped IEM, but still present enough and really smooth. You do not have any harshness here in the upper mid-range or any shoutiness. Vocals and kind of finer guitar work are noticeably quieter than, for example, the bass guitar or drums, and you have to like finer details, kind of getting lost in the rhythm. They are still there though. I do not get the feeling that the kind of center mids are drowned in bass and treble, but they are maybe one and a half steps behind the rest, but they are still there. And I actually like how voices sound here because although they are not the center of attention, they do sound really clear and kind of open. And although it does not bother me, it does sound slightly plasticky and a little artificial sometimes. Treble can be divisive, although the lower treble area is quite smooth and non-fatiguing, like you do not have the usual shoutiness or maybe kind of harshness there that you get with some IEMs. The upper treble, like the airiness, is quite intense. For example, cymbals and various instruments that fall into that frequency range are quite pronounced and are actually in the foreground of the song. And I've read about this, and apparently, this kind of shimmer and like the sizzle is something that is kind of usual for planar IEMs. It is obviously not always as intense as with the PR1 because that one actually has a boost in the upper treble, but this kind of general sound signature can be found in a lot of IEMs. And again, you have to like this. With all this airiness, it does sound very open and it has a nice stage that does not feel like cluttered together. Though the artificial sound was kind of noticeable with certain songs. For example, where voices are somewhere in the back, like the bass is rumbling around, and then the already like really present treble in some songs kind of sizzles in your ear and everything sounds detached from another and like it's not one song. But this is really rare, but I kind of notice that sometimes. Especially listening to a lot of metal, that was noticeable here and there, and sometimes did sound kind of exhausting. The cymbals are really kind of aggressive, and again, if they are already kind of boosted in the mix just a little bit, the PR1 will pronounce that even more. I do think these are great for every kind of electronic music and industrial. Like when there is a driving guitar riff and the bass emphasis works quite well then. And since you do not have so many things in there that rely on accurate and smooth treble, the PR1 sounds pretty powerful. Just as an example, it works extremely well for various kinds of doom metal too, where you too have like a heavy guitar and a bass driven riff. It could even be a little bit like the music can even be a little faster, and then it sounds really powerful and not harsh, not too metallic. A male voice that, because of the bass emphasis, does not sound like weak or anything. And then the boosted treble, which is kind of thrown into the background in a lot of doomy stuff, and then the PR1 will give you this openness and kind of fatness. The whole song sounds like a pretty good separated wall that hits you in the face. The technicalities are fine. I found the separation to be pretty good. Like again, sometimes the bass gets in the way and the overall sound signature is kind of does not work for every song. But usually, even on busy songs, the PR1 does a good job. Imaging kind of similar, like it's pretty good, and I have no issues here. And I found the PR1, the balanced one, especially good for atmospheric games, since you have the bass and the clarity and the treble, and it's actually not sharp in most games, so it's this pretty it's good for soundtracks and just like ambient stuff. I think the comparison that would make the most sense would be with the Truthear Zero, because they are both V-shaped, but the Zero is way more harsh in the upper mid range. So a lot of instruments and especially female voices can get really unpleasant. But the upper treble is not as pronounced, so with the PR1 you have more kind of zing, which again can be piercing sometimes. They are both bassy and I think they are kind of similar here, but I like the PR1 more. I think it's somewhat more capable and it just sounds a little more powerful. Like the Zero's bass can get somewhat soft, because even though you have this unique subwoofer implementation there, the mid bass is still kind of overpowering and softening the sound sometimes, but both are punchy and can rumble pretty good. So this is just like really a matter of taste. Both do bass pretty good. Although the lower mid range of the PR1 is more emphasized and it kind of fattens the sound in a better way, which can be pretty boomy sounding for some listeners, but I like the way it is done here. And the Truthear Zero has more clarity there, but it can also sound thinner. On the technical side, I would say the PR1 is the winner. It's just a little better with a separation and detail retrieval and everything. So that's it with this review. Hope you liked it, and yeah, tell me in the comments if you got one of the three PR1s here and what you like about and what you do not like about it. I would really like to hear that. See you next time.